Today, let's build a celebration scene for the Year of the Snake. Greetings friends, Khaios here. Happy Lunar New Year. I figured since I didn't get a video out on January the 1st, I could still capitalize on the opportunity to celebrate the New Year with the Lunar New Year. 2025 is the Year of the Snake, so let's dive into setting up a nice little scene for the holiday. Before I do, I just wanted to quickly thank you all for all of the kind words and support. I've released 3 videos now this year, and the feedback from you all has been so wholesome and heartwarming. I really do appreciate it. I'm glad you all are excited for more content, as I am extremely excited as well. Now, let's get to the build. The area around the snake statue that I built is relatively flat, but I want to spice it up for today's build. Let's start the landscaping time-lapse. I've had several ideas about how I want to handle this build. With the large snake statue in the center, I'll be putting houses on either side of it. If the houses are at the same level as the base of the statue, then this area becomes far less functional. You're forced to parkour over the statue in order to access the other side of the build. I'd like this build to be fairly functional. Over on Patreon, I offer my world saves in one of the reward tiers, and I know I have supporters that often use my builds and playthroughs, so I'll be making this as functional as possible. With that in mind, I'm going to be building up the land around the snake statue, essentially placing it in a pit. Eventually, there will be a large bridge that goes over the statue, so it can be a focal point of the area without impeding movement. For now, the landscape is going to be extremely rough, as I need to figure out exactly where the buildings are going to be, but I'll be smoothing it out and decorating it further in the video. With the land roughly shaped, let's take a look at the foundations. I'll be building 3 small houses today, so I'll cap off the foundation with stone accent slab. Beneath that slab there will be blue slab wall, ashwood wall, and shadewood fence. I'll be carrying this design through each of the foundations, including the long stairway that's leading from the top of the hill to the bottom of it. Now onto the blocks. The 3 buildings are going to be made out of ashwood, large bamboo, and both colors of dynasty shingles. I'm going to try and use a different style of rooftop than I have in the past. Because dynasty shingles don't blend together, there will be a ton of tiny gaps between all of the blocks. I fill those gaps in with copper brick, as it is a fairly shingle-esque shape. The building on the left will just be a plain brown wood, but in theme with the Lunar New Year, I want the 2 buildings on the top of the hill to be a deep red. I'll also continue the red motif to the bridges, blending ashwood with gray brick and pearlwood fence. And yes, I did say bridges. Apparently I made my canvas larger than my camera account can see, so there's actually a bridge just off to the right, which I'll be sure to show off later when the build is finished. If you've been enjoying the videos I've been releasing since my return, please consider leaving a like and subscribe to help the channel grow. If you're able to, and you'd like to help support me further, I have links to my Patreon down below, or you can become a channel member for various rewards, including access to my private Discord server and world downloads. And with that support plug out of the way, let's get into wall placement. I will be doing a different wall interior design for each of the houses. Starting with the left, the house will be entirely wood, just like the exterior. Rich mahogany and shadewood fences will sit behind the doors. Spooky wood wall will make up the majority of the interior wall, while large bamboo and ashwood wall make support beams. Ebonwood fence makes up the windows. Moving on to the middle house, the same fences will sit behind the doors. On the sides of the house, I will continue the wood pattern used in the previous house, but in the center I am going with 1 large window and white dynasty wall. Boreal wood lines the floor for an added accent. A line of platforms also sits above the window to give it a more completed feel. In the final house, I want to do the opposite of this one and have a wooden panel in the middle with white dynasty walls on the sides. Each of the dynasty wall segments will have a large round window. To achieve a round feel, I'll be using actuated living wood. Okay, so the windows are pretty big for this house. I like them, so I think I'll keep them, but they cut into the wood panels and I want the windows to sit only on the White Dynasty wall, so I'm gonna have to reduce that wood panel to just a single wooden beam. I am considering adding the wooden panel back and going with smaller square windows, but I'm not entirely sure yet. While I mold that over, I'm going to kick up a time lapse and finish off the landscaping. The most obvious part that needs addressing is the blockiness of the land, so I'm going to start off by putting my hammer to work, shaping all of the areas between the buildings, walkways, bridges, and around the statue. When the shaping is done, there's a lot of dark lines between the sandstone and the mud. I'm going to blend those together with some sand, which is a block that blends with both of the others. I will also work sand throughout the sandstone to break up the texture and add some variety to it. Now I'm going to be using both worn and craggy stone walls around the cliff faces to give them a bit more depth and detail. I'll also add them to the pit just to the right of the snake statue, as well as under the second bridge off screen. Those two areas will be filled with water, which I'm going to be pouring in right now, including a small waterfall to tie the center part together. Next, I'm going to add more color to the landscape. You may be wondering why I've had stone beneath the buildings rather than sandstone, since I went with sandstone for the cliff walls. Well, the reason for that is because I'm going to be placing brown moss onto all of the stone throughout the build. I didn't want it on the cliff faces, so I went with sandstone there. The brown moss will give a perfect jungle stone vibe to the area. On the topic of the moss, why is brown moss green and green moss kind of blue? I'll never understand it. Anyway, living leaf walls will help create small bushes around the area to liven up. Some strange plants and jungle plants from the Rebel Maker will work throughout the build, including inside of the foundations, to give even more life. I didn't really leave myself much room for trees, but I will plant one under the bridge. Lastly, I'll use a small bit of negative painted smoke block under the waterfall to give it a splash effect, and now the landscape is complete. I'm just going to quickly decorate the interiors of the houses, as they won't be the focal point of this build, and I don't really need to go too much into detail about what I'm doing there. The decorations that I'll be putting outside of the houses, however, will really bring in the Lunar New Year vibe, and I have something special to help out with that. Let me just wrap up these interiors. Okay, here are the 3 houses completed. Now for something I've been working on in the background. I wanted to have some festive red flags or banners hanging around the world. One of my favorite cloth looking materials is sail wall, but while I was happy with the shape, I wasn't really happy with the coloration of it. Even when painted deep red, it's just too pale. So I opened up paint.net and I created a resource pack where I edited the sail wall to make it a much more vibrant red. I even gave it a gold outline. I feel this really fits the Lunar New Year vibe. But this gave me another idea. If I was going to be working on a resource pack for this build anyway, why not add a couple of other little things that could really fit the vibe? So I pixelated some kanji for snake, and I used it to replace the ship wheels sprite. And now we have this awesome character that I can add on top of some of those red banners, to make it look like the word snake was painted on top. Then I had one more idea. I sprited a tiny snake and replaced one of the lizard statues with this image. Now I can also add a black snake painting to the banners when I want to, as long as I use echo platforms to hold the statue up. I went with a statue instead of a painting because if you're looking left or right with a statue, you can flip the image, which I felt was pretty fitting for the snake. You can't do that with paintings. I'm really happy with how the resource pack turned out. Let me know if you agree. If you're one of my patrons that download this world save, I'll be sure to include the resource pack in the save folder so you can check it out in game, otherwise things might not make as much sense. So let's take these decorative pieces plus some other vanilla ones and throw down some exterior decorations around the build. Before I start the time lapse, I just wanted to note one thing that I'll be doing that won't make as much sense in the time lapse. I'm going to be adding these Chinese lanterns to the corners of the roofs. Usually the lanterns connect to the bottom side of a block, but as you can see here, I'm not actually able to place it. This is due to the fact that the second block is sloped. If I unslope it, however, I can then place the lantern, then reshape the block. For some reason, the lantern doesn't break when I take a hammer to the block, so this is how I'm going to be hanging those lanterns on the buildings. I just wanted to note that for anybody who tries to replicate this themselves. CheesyPaninie gave me the suggestion that my build should have fireworks going off during the night shot, and I totally agree. So I placed some firework boxes around the build in various locations and echo-coded them to make them invisible. The thing is, I don't want all of the fireworks firing at the exact same time, and I don't want them to go off too often. So I also created a bunch of randomizer logic gates for every firework box. Let's take a look at those real quick. Each randomizer contains an A and D gate, 19 off logic gates, and 1 on logic gate, as well as 1 faulty logic gate. The way this works is when the faulty logic gate is activated, it will trigger the randomizer. Since there are 20 logic gates in total, and all but one of them are in the off position, that means each randomizer has a 1 in 20 chance of activating the fireworks box, which in turn means they won't be going off constantly. I wire those randomizers up to a half-second timer, and now all of the fireworks go off at a decent rate without going off constantly, and there will never be more than a few of them happening at the same time, so it feels a lot more random. Oh, and just ignore that lizard brick wall above the snake head. I used that to spawn the flying snakes into the intro, but since this is a pre-golem world, I can't actually break those walls, so I just echo-coded them to hide them away. They've secretly been hiding there all along. With the decorations out of the way, before we dive into the final look of the build, I want to have some lanterns floating in the background. There isn't a Lantern Knight monolith, at least in vanilla Terraria, so I need to make a bit of a blood sacrifice. One moment, please. And here is the final build in daytime. Overall, I'm quite pleased with how it's turned out, but it gets even better once we get to nighttime with the lanterns. Let me know what you all think about the build in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're interested in supporting the channel further, please consider supporting me on Patreon or right here as a YouTube member. A huge thank you to my biggest supporter for the month, sarcasm not intended, and a special thank you to CheesyPaninie for making the video's thumbnail. There's a link to her channel in the description. Thank you all very much for watching. Be back soon with a new video. Happy building.